Victor Crow walked into Elena Voss's bookstore on a Tuesday afternoon like he owned every inch of it. He didn't knock anything over. He didn't raise his voice. He just picked up a children's picture book from the display near the front window, turned it over in his hands, and said, "Cute kid. Noah, right? 7 years old, goes to Westfield Elementary, walks home on Fridays with the Garner woman from next door." Elena went cold behind the register. Victor set the book down precisely where he'd found it. "Tell Damien Vale I said hello," he said. Then he smiled, buttoned his coat, and walked back out into the rain. She didn't breathe for a full minute. If you've ever had someone describe your child's routine back to you like a warning, drop everything and stay with us, because this story is about to go places that will keep you up tonight. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss what happens next. Hit that like button and leave a comment telling us what city or country you're watching from. We want to see exactly how far this story travels. The night Damien Vale walked back into Elena Voss's life, the rain came down hard enough to blur the streetlights into orange smears across the wet pavement. It was the kind of rain that made you feel like the city was trying to wash something away. Elena was alone in the store. It was 20 minutes to closing, and she'd already turned the sign to closed on the door, but she hadn't locked it yet because Noah had texted from upstairs. They lived in the apartment above the shop, asking if she could bring up a specific book, a green one about wolves, and she'd come down to find it. She was on her knees in the children's section when the door opened. The bell above it rang. Cool air pushed in. She looked up, and for a second, standing between the biography shelves and the used paperback rack, she didn't fully process what she was seeing. She registered. Tall, expensive black coat, dark hair showing gray at the temples now. A stillness about him that didn't belong in a bookstore. Then her brain caught up with her eyes. Every sound in the room seemed to drop out. Damien Vale stood 6 feet inside her door, water running off his coat, looking at her with an expression she couldn't name. Not quite shock, not quite recognition, something halfway between the two that made his jaw tight and his chest visibly still. "We're closed," she said. Her own voice surprised her. It came out even. "Elena." That was all he said. Her name. One word, in the same low register she had spent years trying to forget. She stood up slowly, the wolf book still in her hand. Her fingers went white around it. So became aware that her heart was beating somewhere in the back of her throat, and she forced herself to breathe through it, forced herself to think clearly, because there was a child upstairs who needed the green book, and there was a man in her store who had no right to be standing in it. "I said we're closed, Damien." He hadn't moved from the door. He was looking at her the way someone looks at a photograph they've carried for a long time, and then suddenly found the actual person, disoriented by the reality of it, by the fact that the living version of something you've been carrying can look right back at you. "I know," he said. "I saw the sign." "Then you know what it means." "I need 5 minutes." "You needed 5 minutes 8 years ago," she said. "You didn't take them." Something shifted in his face. A muscle tightened along his jaw. He'd always had that tell. Not anger exactly, but the effort to contain something that wanted out. She'd forgotten how well she used to know his face, and she resented that the knowledge came back this quickly. "I understand why you'd say that," he said. "Good. Then you understand why you should leave." He didn't leave. He stood there for another full 3 seconds, and in those 3 seconds, Elena became aware of something she hadn't let herself think about yet. The specific quality of the silence upstairs. No footsteps. No television. Noah had turned everything off, which meant he was listening for her to come back up, which meant there was a reasonable chance he would come down the stairs to check on her if she didn't appear soon. "Damien," she lowered her voice, "whatever you're here for, whatever you need, I can't help you. That part of my life is done." "I'm not here because I need something," he said. "Then why are you here?" He opened his mouth, stopped, looked at her with something that might have been pain, might have been something else, might have been both at once. "I saw you," he said finally. "Last week. You were coming out of the pharmacy on Clement Street. You had a—" He stopped again. Elena's blood went very quiet. "You had a boy with you," Damien said. The room felt different now, smaller. "My son," she said. "I know." His voice was careful, too careful. "How old is he?" She didn't answer immediately. There was a version of this moment she'd run through in her mind approximately 1,000 times over 7 years, always in the abstract, always safely hypothetical, always something that was never going to happen. Now it was happening, and she couldn't locate the rehearsed responses, couldn't find the clean, precise thing she was supposed to say. 7, she said. Damien said nothing. His name is Noah, she added. She wasn't sure why she added it. The silence stretched. Damien's gaze dropped from her face to the book she was holding. The green one about wolves, Noah's name written in marker on the inside cover in Elena's handwriting because he lost things at school. And then back up. Elena. His voice was different now, rougher. I need you to tell me something, and I need you to tell me the truth. I don't owe you any truth. I know that. He took one step forward, just one. I know I don't have any right to ask. I know how this looks. I know what I did, what you think I did, and I'm not here to argue about any of that. I'm asking you something else. Another step. She didn't move. Is he mine? The word landed like a stone in water. Elena looked at the man standing in her bookstore, the man who had disappeared from her life without a word, without a letter, without so much as a text message. The same week she'd taken a pregnancy test and sat on the bathroom floor trying to figure out how to breathe. And she felt something very old and very specific rise up in her chest. Not grief. She was past grief. Not love. She was past that too, or she'd told herself so often enough that it felt like the same thing. What she felt was the particular bone-deep exhaustion of having carried something heavy alone for so long that you've forgotten what it felt like to not carry it. Get out of my store, she said quietly. Elena, don't. Her voice went sharp. Don't say my name again. Don't stand here in my store and look at me like that. You don't get to walk back in here after 8 years and ask me questions like that. You don't have that right. I know. You keep saying you know things. You knew we were closed and you came in anyway. You know you don't have the right and you're asking anyway. Her voice was shaking now, and she hated it. Hated that her voice was shaking. Hated that she was standing here in the store she'd built from nothing. In the life she'd built from nothing. Holding her son's wolf book like a prop in somebody else's drama. You don't get to do this. Damien was very still. His hands, she noticed this the way you notice irrelevant things when your nervous system is overwhelmed, were loose at his sides. Not fists, not reaching for anything, just open, hanging there, which was somehow worse. He was wearing a necklace, Damien said. Elena stopped breathing. Small silver chain, Damien said, with a compass on it. His voice was low and steady and absolutely controlled in a way that told her exactly how hard he was working to keep it that way. My mother gave me that compass when I was 9 years old. I gave it to you the night before the last night I saw you. I told you it was the only thing for my family I'd ever kept. The wolf book hit the floor. Neither of them moved to pick it up. I need to know, Damien said. The stairs creaked. Both of them turned at the same moment, toward the narrow door at the back of the store that opened to the staircase. It swung open, and there was Noah, bare feet on the hardwood, sleep pants, gray Henley with a small stain near the collar from dinner, dark hair standing up on one side the way it always did when he'd been lying on it. He looked at his mother, looked at the tall stranger in the expensive coat. Mom? He said. Damien Vale, who had not visibly flinched at anything in the past 8 minutes, went absolutely rigid. Because up close, there was no question. It was there in the line of Noah's jaw, the set of his eyes, the particular angle of his brow when he was uncertain, a look Elena had seen 100 times on a different face, the compass glinting at his throat. Noah looked back at Damien with the direct, unafraid curiosity of a 7-year-old who hadn't yet learned what it cost to be curious about dangerous things. Hi, Noah said. Damien's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Noah, go back upstairs, Elena said. Her voice was very calm. She was very proud of how calm her voice was. But you didn't bring my book. I'll bring it in a minute. Noah looked at the book on the floor, clearly performing a calculation about whether it was worth arguing. He decided against it. Okay, he said. He looked at Damien one more time. Then the door closed and his feet went back up the stairs and the creak of his weight disappeared. The store was silent except for the rain. Damien's eyes were still on the door. Damien. Elena bent down and picked up the book. When she straightened, her decision was already made. It had been made before she picked the book up. It had probably been made the second Noah appeared in the doorway, wearing that compass necklace and looking at his father with his father's own eyes. "You need to leave now, and you need to not come back." He turned to look at her. His face had been rearranged. She couldn't describe it more precisely than that. Something had moved beneath the surface and left a different landscape. "Elena, I mean it." She walked to the front door and held it open. Rain-cooled air pushed in. "Whatever you came here looking for, you need to find it somewhere else. We have nothing to discuss." He walked toward the door, stopped when he was a foot away from her, close enough that she could smell rain on his coat and something beneath it, cedar or smoke, the same as he'd always worn, which was unbearable and irrelevant. "He's mine," Damien said. Not a question. "Good night," Elena said. He walked out into the rain. She locked the door behind him, turned off the remaining lights, walked to the back staircase, climbed the stairs, and sat down on the couch next to Noah, who was watching something on his tablet with his headphones in. She sat there for a long time. Noah pulled one headphone out without looking up. "That man had sad eyes," he said. "Yeah," Elena said. "Do you know him?" She looked at her son, at the compass around his neck, at the jaw and brow that had answered Damien's question more completely than anything she could have said. "A long time ago," she told him. "A long time ago I did." Noah nodded, like this made sense, and put his headphone back in. Elena sat in the quiet apartment above her bookstore and listened to the rain and tried to figure out how long she had before the world she'd built for the two of them started shaking at its foundation. She was pretty sure the answer was not very long at all. She was right. The call came at 6:47 the next morning while she was making Noah's lunch and he was upstairs looking for his left shoe. Unknown number. She almost didn't pick up. She picked up. "I know this isn't what you want," Damien said without preamble. "I'm not calling to argue or to demand anything. I called because I need you to understand something. How did you get this number?" A pause. "Elena." Right, of course. He was Damien Vale. He could find a phone number. "There are people," he said, "who know I went to your store last night." Her hand stopped moving over the cutting board. "My business has enemies. Most of them would never consider going after a civilian. But there are a few who aren't careful about those distinctions, and if they've connected you to me, don't do this," she said. "Don't do what?" "Don't make yourself necessary. Don't come back into my life and immediately position yourself as the only person who can protect me from the problems you brought. I know how that works." Another pause. Longer this time. "You're right," he said. "That's a fair thing to say." The honesty surprised her. She didn't let it show, even though there was no one on the phone to show it to. "I'm going to increase security on your block regardless," Damien said. "You won't see it. You won't have to interact with anyone. But I'd rather you knew it was there than wonder later why certain things were different. You can hate me for it. I understand." He ended the call. She stood in her kitchen with the phone in her hand, and Noah came down the stairs with his left shoe found and his backpack mostly zipped. And she made herself turn and hand him his lunch and ask about his homework and send him off to school. She stood in the window and watched him walk down the block. The compass caught the morning light at his throat. She thought, "I should have moved years ago. I should have changed the story I told myself about why we were still in this city." She thought, "I knew, somewhere under everything, that staying here was a choice." She thought, he looked at Noah and his whole face fell open. She turned away from the window. There was a bookstore to open. She didn't see Damien again for 11 days, but she felt the shape of his presence the way you feel a change in weather, not through any single specific thing, but through the accumulation of small differences. A black car parked 2 doors down that hadn't been there before. The man who bought coffee from the cart across the street every morning and occasionally looked at the front of her shop in a way that was patient rather than casual. The phone number that texted her. No name, just a number. A single message. "Everything is fine. No need to respond." She didn't respond. On the 12th day, she opened the store at 9 and found a letter tucked under the front door. No envelope. Folded once. Her name on the outside in handwriting she recognized the way you recognize a song you haven't heard in years. Not immediately, but in layers, the familiarity arriving piece by piece. She unfolded it standing in the doorway with her coat still on. "Elena," it began, "I'm not asking for anything. I understand you have no reason to give me anything. I know what my disappearing cost you, and I know that whatever explanation I offer will sound like an excuse, and I'm not interested in making excuses. But there is someone who needs you to know the truth. Not for my sake, not even for yours. And I think you already know who that someone is. I'll be at the corner of Halsted and Monroe at noon on Saturday. If you don't come, I'll understand. I won't contact you again. It was signed, D. Elena folded the letter and put it in her coat pocket and opened her store. She thought about the letter for 3 days. She went on Saturday. She told herself she went because she was tired of wondering. She told herself she went for practical reasons, because whatever Damien Vale was mixed up in had apparently already touched her block, her building, the space around her son's daily life, and she needed information to protect him. She told herself a lot of things on the walk to Halsted and Monroe. Damien was already there when she arrived, standing against a brick wall with his hands in his coat pockets, not checking his phone, not looking at his watch, just waiting with the particular patience of someone who has spent a long time not knowing if something they wanted would show up. When he saw her, something moved across his face. Not relief exactly, something quieter than relief. Something closer to the way you exhale after holding your breath so long you stopped noticing you were doing it. "You came," he said. "Don't read too much into it," Elena said. "Talk." He talked. He talked for 40 minutes, standing on that corner while the city moved around them, and what he told her unmade 8 years of the story she'd been living inside. He told her about Victor Crow, about the manufactured evidence, about the photographs Crow had shown him, photographs that didn't exist, conversations that had never happened, proof that Elena had been feeding information to a rival organization that wanted Damien dead. He told her he'd been given 48 hours to disappear or watch people he loved get hurt. He told her he'd believed it because he'd been 28 years old and in over his head, and the man showing him the photographs was the person he trusted most in the world. He told her that by the time he'd discovered the truth, 2 years later, through a bookkeeper who'd stumbled onto Crow's financial records, it had already been too long, and he'd already decided that whatever life Elena had built in his absence was safer without him in it. He told her about the box. "What box?" she said. "I kept everything you ever wrote me," he said. "Every letter, every note, the receipt from that diner on the night I kept everything. I don't know why I'm telling you this. I'm not telling you to. I just need you to know that none of it went the way it was supposed to go." Elena looked at him for a long time. "Victor Crow," she said finally. "Yes." "He's still around." Damien's face changed. "Yes. And he knows about Noah." A beat too long before he answered. "Elena, he knows about Noah," she said again. Not a question. Damien's jaw tightened. "I believe he saw us together. The night I came to your store. I think he had eyes on me." The city kept moving around them. A bus rolled past. Someone's kid on a bicycle veered around a crack in the sidewalk. "He came in," Elena said. Damien went still. "What?" "Victor Crow. He came into my store 2 weeks ago. I didn't know who he was, I'd never met him, but he described Noah's school, his route home, the neighbor who walks with him on Fridays. He said to tell you hello." She watched Damien's face drain. "I didn't connect it to you because I hadn't seen you yet. I thought it was random, some strange, threatening man. I almost called the police." "Why didn't you?" "Because he didn't do anything. He picked up a book and put it back and left." She looked at Damien directly. "He was sending a message. I understand that now." Damien was not visibly a man who scared easily. I was visibly scared now. "Elena," he said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully." "I'm listening." "I'm going to fix this," he said, "whatever it costs me, whatever I have to do. I'm not going to let anything happen to Noah or to you. I need you to know that's not conditional on anything, on whether you ever speak to me again, on whether you let me anywhere near your lives. It doesn't matter. They will not touch him." Elena looked at the man she had once loved, at the damage 8 years had put in his face, and the damage she suspected she'd put there too, and the specific kind of determination that had moved into his eyes and taken up permanent residence. She thought about a 7-year-old boy in sleep pants with a compass at his throat, telling a stranger in an expensive coat that he had sad eyes. "You have a lot to answer for," she said. "I know. And I am nowhere near ready to—" She stopped. started again. This doesn't mean anything, whatever this is. Me standing here, that's not absolution. I know, he said again, but I need you to tell me what you're going to do about Victor Crow. Damien looked at her, and for just a moment, under all the expensive coat and the controlled stillness and the years of building himself into something that powerful men feared, she could see the 28-year-old who had handed her a compass and told her it was the only thing from his family he'd ever kept. He told her what he was going to do. She listened to every word. The rain started again, soft and cold, beating on both their coats. Neither of them moved to leave. The rain had stopped by the time Elena got back to the bookstore, but the wet was still in everything. The pavement, the air, the sleeve of her coat where she'd leaned against the brick wall on Halstead, and Monroe, while Damien Vale told her the truth about 8 years she'd spent being angry at the wrong version of the story. She unlocked the front door and stood inside for a moment without turning on the lights. The letter was still in her coat pocket. She could feel it there, the slight weight of it, the fold of the paper. She put the kettle on in the back room and told herself she was not going to cry, and she didn't. What she did instead was sit down at her desk with a piece of paper and write out, in her neatest handwriting, the name Victor Crow. Then below it she wrote, came into the store, described Noah's school, said to tell Damien hello. Then she folded that paper too and put it in the drawer under the cash register, which was where she kept the things she needed to remember but couldn't afford to think about while customers were in the store. She opened at 9. She sold 4 books by noon. A woman bought a copy of something with a bird on the cover and cried a little at the register and said she was buying it for her sister, and Elena handed her a tissue and did not think about Victor Crow once during that transaction, which she considered a personal achievement. Damien called at 2. You're back, he said. The store doesn't run itself. I need to ask you something. You need to ask me a lot of things. The financial records, he said. Victor's ledgers. You told me on Saturday that you'd come across some paperwork years ago. Something you found in a bag you thought was mine before I left. Documents you didn't understand at the time. Elena was quiet. I need to know where those documents are, Damien said. This was the thing she hadn't planned to tell him yet. She'd mentioned the documents almost by accident on Saturday, filling in a gap in the chronology, and the moment they'd come out of her mouth, she'd watched Damien's expression sharpen in a way that told her they mattered more than she'd understood. I need to know why they matter first, she said. They're Victor's paper trail. The financial records showing how he built his position inside my organization. The side deals, the redirected funds, the payments to rivals. Without that, what I have against him is testimony. My word against his. With those records, he paused. With those records, there's no version of this where he walks away. And without them? A beat. He has options. Elena thought about the man in her store picking up Noah's picture book, turning it over in his hands, setting it down exactly where he'd found it, like he was teaching her something about precision. They're in a storage unit, she said, on Kedzie. I've had them for 8 years. I didn't know what they were. I thought they were tax records from your father's company. I only kept them because I thought they might be something you'd come back for. She stopped. Damien was very quiet on the other end of the line. I kept them because I thought you'd come back, she said again, more evenly this time. That's the only reason. I'm not telling you that for any other reason than because you should know it. Elena, the unit number is 114. I'll leave the key with Marcus at the front desk. She ended the call. She stood behind the register and looked at the front window of her store, at the street beyond it, at the black car that was still parked 2 doors down, the same one that had been there for 12 days. She thought, I kept them for 8 years because I thought he'd come back. She thought, I need to stop saying true things out loud. Damien sent a man named Reyes to the storage unit that afternoon. Reyes was 30, quiet, and had the kind of face that remembered everything it saw without advertising the fact. He retrieved the documents, photographed every page, and had a digital copy in Damien's hands before the dinner hour. Damien sat with them for 2 hours in the back office of a building on the south side that he used for the kind of work that required no windows. The documents were everything he'd hoped they were, and then some. 14 years of misdirection, redirected accounts, shell payments, introductions to rival families framed as coincidental meetings. Victor Crow had been building a second empire inside the Vale organization the way a parasite builds mass, quietly, incrementally, In the places no one is watching because the places being watched are doing fine. The specifics were not what hit Damien hardest. What hit him was the date on the earliest document. It was dated from a period 6 months before Damien's father died. He sat back in his chair. Victor had been at the funeral. Victor had delivered a eulogy about loyalty. Damien put the documents down on the desk and looked at the wall for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called his head of operations, a woman named Sasha, who had been with the organization for 11 years and who had survived 3 internal restructurings by being smarter and less sentimental than everyone around her. "I need a meeting," he said. "The inner circle only, not Victor." A beat. Sasha understood beats. "When?" she said. "Tonight. Victor will notice he wasn't included." "I know." Another beat. "Should I be worried?" "Not about me," Damien said. Get everyone to the Monroe location by 9. He ended the call. He picked the documents back up. He thought about his father's funeral, about the eulogy, about the specific words Victor had used. Thomas Vale was a man who believed in the people around him, and that belief was never misplaced. And the way Victor's voice had gone rough at exactly the right moment. Damien had thought it was grief. He understood now what it actually was. The meeting at Monroe that night lasted 2 hours and 15 minutes. When it was over, 3 of the 7 people in the room looked like they needed a drink badly. One of them, a man named Garrett, who had worked with Damien's father before Damien himself had been old enough to be in the room, was the palest Damien had ever seen him, and Garrett was a man who had been present for things that would permanently alter most people's relationship with sleep. "Victor built contacts inside the Delaney group," Garrett said, for the second time, like repetition would make it make more sense. "For how long?" "The earliest evidence is 14 years ago," Damien said. Thomas was still... Yes. Garrett sat back and did the math that Damien had already done. The math was not good. Sasha hadn't said anything for the last 20 minutes. She was reading through the photograph documents on a tablet, moving through them with the systematic focus of someone running a checklist in their head. When she looked up, her expression told Damien she'd found something. "There's a payment here," she said, 2 years ago. "Made through the Seville account, the one we closed in the restructuring." "I see it." "It went to a private security firm on the north side." She looked at him. "That firm no longer exists. But I know who ran it." "Tell me." She told him. Damien kept his face still. He was good at keeping his face still. He'd been practicing since he was 19. "You're certain," he said. "I pulled the registration records on my phone while you were talking. The director of that firm was a man named Paul Garrett." The table went quiet. Garrett hadn't moved. His color, if anything, had gotten worse. "Garrett," Damien said. His voice was very calm. "I didn't know what the money was for," Garrett said. He was looking at the table, not at Damien. "Victor told me it was a retainer, security consulting. I asked him twice what specifically, and he told me it was handled. And you accepted that." Garrett stopped. Started again. His hands were flat on the table. "I was managing your father's estate at the time. I had 4 concurrent situations, and Victor was the one who handled the day-to-day accounts. I didn't..." He looked up. "Damien, I didn't know." The room waited. "I believe you," Damien said. The room exhaled. "But I need to know everything Victor told you about that period. Every conversation, every instruction, starting from the day my father got sick." Damien met Garrett's eyes. "Everything, including the things you thought didn't matter." "That's going to take a while," Garrett said. "We have time." Damien glanced at Sasha. "Lock the Monroe location down tonight. Nobody in or out without my direct clearance." Sasha was already typing. Victor Crow found out about the meeting at 11:45 that night, which was faster than Damien had expected and slower than Victor had probably intended. Victor's source was someone in the building's security rotation, a man who had been placing and receiving payments from the second account for 3 years, and who apparently decided that alerting his actual employer was the more immediately practical form of self-preservation. Victor made 4 phone calls between 11:45 and midnight. Damien's surveillance team captured all 4. By morning, Damien knew that Victor had activated 2 outside contractors, reached out to a contact in the Delaney organization, and called a number registered to a property management company in Oak Park that owned, among other holdings, the block where Elena's bookstore was located. That last call was 47 seconds long. Damien read the surveillance report at 6 in the morning. Standing in his kitchen with coffee, he wasn't drinking. He read it twice. Then he called Reyes. "The block on Addison," he said without preamble. "Upgrade the coverage. I want eyes on every entrance and exit, both buildings adjacent, and the school route." "Already moving," Reyes said. He'd been awake since 5. He'd seen the same report. "If anyone approaches the store before it opens, I understand. Or the apartment entrance. I understand." Damien ended the call. He picked up his coffee and put it down again without drinking it. He thought about 47 seconds. He thought about what a man like Victor Crow could communicate in 47 seconds to someone who already had context and was waiting for an instruction. He picked up a different phone and called Elena. It was 6:08 in the morning. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she was already awake, which meant she hadn't slept well, which he didn't let himself think about. "Victor knows about the documents," he said. A silence. Then, "How?" "I moved too fast. There was a leak in my own house that I should have identified sooner." Kept his voice level. "I don't want to alarm you. You're calling me at 6 in the morning. I'm already alarmed." "Fair point." He exhaled. He called a number connected to a property management company that has holdings on your block last night. "I don't know what that means yet, but I need you to take Noah to school this morning through the Damon entrance, not the Main Street exit. And I need you to tell the school that nobody picks him up today except you, in person, with your ID." "I do that anyway." "I know. I'm telling you to do it especially today." He heard her breathe. He heard, in the background, the small sounds of a morning kitchen, something on the stove, a drawer opening and closing, the particular creak of a house settling. "Damien," she said. "Yes." "How bad is this?" He considered several versions of the answer. "It's manageable," he said. "That's not the same as not bad." "No," he said. "It's not." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "He came into my store, Damien. He stood in front of my son's books and told me where Noah walks home on Fridays. That was before any of this." Her voice was even, which he'd learned meant she was working very hard to keep it that way. "Whatever you're doing about Victor, whatever timeline you're working with, I need you to understand that there is a child involved, and I will not wait for a situation that feels manageable." "I know that. Do you?" Because manageable is a word people use when they're asking other people to be patient. "Elena." He stopped. Let a beat pass. "I hear you. I am not asking you to be patient. I am asking you to take the Damon exit this morning." A pause. "Fine," she said, "but I want to call by noon. I don't care how busy you are." "You'll have it." She ended the call. He stood in his kitchen in the early morning and thought about 47 seconds, and the particular edge in her voice that meant she was scared, but had decided that being scared wasn't going to help her. He thought, "I should have dealt with Victor Crow 2 years ago, when I first found out what he'd done." He thought, "I told myself it was strategy, waiting for the right moment, building the complete case." He thought, "I was avoiding the part where I had to walk back into Elena's life and explain what I'd cost her." He put that thought down and picked up his coat and went to work. Elena took the Damon exit. She walked Noah to school through the back route, the one that went past the hardware store and the community garden and came out 2 blocks from the school's side entrance. Noah asked twice why they were going the weird way. She told him she wanted to see if the roses in the community garden had come up yet. He looked at her with the specific skepticism of a 7-year-old who knows when an adult is not quite telling the truth, but hasn't yet developed the social vocabulary to challenge it directly. "There aren't any roses yet," he said. "I know. I was curious about whether there were." "That doesn't make sense. You're very literal. You always say that like it's a bad thing." "It's not a bad thing," she said. "Come on." She dropped him at the side entrance and watched him go through the door and stood on the sidewalk for a moment after it closed behind him, just long enough to let herself feel the specific fear and then put it away. Then she turned and walked back the way she'd come. She was half a block from the store when she noticed the woman, standing at the corner of Addison and Damon with a coffee cup in her hand, not looking at anything in particular, not on her phone, not in apparent conversation with anyone, just standing. Elena noticed her because she'd been standing in exactly the same position with the same body language when Elena and Noah had come out of the building 40 minutes earlier. That was a long time to stand at a corner with a coffee. Elena kept walking. She did not change her pace or her direction. She unlocked the front door of the store and went inside and stood just inside the door where she could see the corner through the front window. The woman with the coffee was still there. Elena's phone buzzed. A text from the unknown number that had been texting her for nearly 2 weeks. Woman at the corner works for us. She's there for you. No concern. She stared at the text. Then she typed back, "You should have told me before I spent the last 2 minutes building a threat assessment. 3 dots. Then, fair. I'm sorry." She put the phone in her pocket. It was the first time he had apologized for something small. She wasn't sure what to do with that, so she opened the register and started counting the float and told herself it didn't mean anything. Well, the call at noon came 9 minutes early, which she supposed counted. The property management company, Damien said, has a subsidiary that operates under a building services license. That license gives them legal access to maintenance and utility inspection on properties they manage, including yours. Elena stopped moving. Meaning what? Meaning Victor has a legal mechanism to put a person inside your building without it looking like anything. A maintenance call. An inspection. Something routine. His voice was controlled, but only just. "We found the paperwork this morning. There's a scheduled utility inspection on your building for Thursday." "Thursday is 3 days away." "Yes." "And you think it's connected to the 47-second call?" A pause. "I think Victor is very precise about the tools he uses. I don't think he makes 47-second calls to property managers by accident." Elena sat down on the stool behind the register. A customer came through the door. A man in a blue jacket, regular, bought a used Thriller every 2 weeks. And she lifted one finger at him in the universal signal for one moment and turned slightly away from the counter. "What do you want me to do?" she said quietly. "I want you to let me move you and Noah for 3 days." She'd been expecting this. "No," she said. "Elena, this is my store. This is our home. Noah has school and a routine and a reading group on Wednesday evenings that he has been looking forward to for 2 weeks. I am not pulling him out of his life because Victor Crow scheduled a fake utility inspection. It might not be fake, and it might be. The risk, she said, low and steady, is that I uproot my son's sense of safety and security and routine because a man I've never properly met is using my building's management company as a threat. If I run every time someone implies a threat, I will spend my son's entire childhood running." She heard her own voice tighten. "I grew up watching my mother run. I am not doing that." Silence. "Okay," Damien said. She blinked. "Okay?" "You heard what I said. I disagree with the decision. I think the risk is real, and I don't think you're being entirely rational about it, which is understandable given the circumstances. But I also understand why you made it, and I'm not going to keep pushing." A pause. "I will be there Thursday, personally. Not Reyes, not surveillance. Me." She hadn't expected that either. "That's not necessary," she said. "I know." He ended the call. She put her phone down and looked up. The man in the blue jacket was patiently examining the Thriller display with the resigned patience of a person who has learned to wait out other people's phone calls. "Sorry about that," she said. "No trouble," he said. "Do you have anything new in the Kellerman section?" She did. She found it for him and ran the transaction and smiled and said goodbye and stood in the quiet after he left, looking at the front door of her store, at the glass, and beyond it the street, and beyond that the corner where a woman with a coffee cup was doing the professional version of standing watch, and thought about a man who'd said okay when he could have kept pushing. She thought about a box of letters he'd kept for 8 years. She told herself it didn't change anything. She was starting to suspect she was lying to herself. Wednesday came and went without incident. Noah went to his reading group and came home excited about a book involving a boy who could talk to birds. Elena made pasta. They watched 40 minutes of a nature documentary, and Noah fell asleep on the couch, and she carried him to bed. Normal. Completely, almost aggressively normal. Thursday morning, she opened the store at 9, and Damien was already there. Not inside. Standing across the street with his hands in his coat pockets, leaning against the opposite building like a man with nowhere urgent to be. When she unlocked the front door, he looked over. She gave him no gesture of acknowledgement. He gave her none back. They both understood the arrangement. The utility inspector arrived at 10:15. His name was on the paperwork. R. Mello, licensed building technician, scheduled by Harbor Property Services for a standard gas line inspection. He was a compact man in his 40s with a canvas work bag and a clipboard. He showed his ID at the door. The ID was real. Elena had sent a photo to Damien the moment the knock came, and the response had come back in under 4 minutes. ID is genuine. Robert Mello, clean record. We don't know yet if he's knowingly involved or just doing a job. She let him in. He was professional, polite. He moved through the back room with the clipboard and the bag and checked the connections near the utility panel with equipment that looked exactly like what it was supposed to be. And then, for 6 seconds, Elena counted, because she had been watching carefully, he stopped at the base of the staircase that led to the apartment. He looked up the stairs. He didn't move toward them. He just looked, and then he looked back at the panel, and then he made a mark on his clipboard. She was still looking at the staircase when her phone buzzed. Damien, did he go near the stairs? Her thumbs moved, looked at them, didn't go up. 6 seconds. A pause longer than usual. Then, I'm coming in. She typed, don't, he's almost done, don't make it a thing. 3 dots. Nothing. Mello finished at the panel, thanked her, and left. She locked the door behind him and stood in the empty store. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a photo. Damien had sent her a screenshot. It took her a moment to understand what she was looking at, and then she understood. It was a still image from one of the surveillance cameras, time-stamped from 90 seconds ago, showing the side of the utility inspector's canvas bag as he came out of the building. The bag had a small device attached to the inside panel, partially visible through the unzipped top. It was not utility equipment. Elena's hand went cold around the phone. The next message read, Reyes has him. Don't be alarmed. He's being stopped 2 blocks away. Nothing visible from the street, looking like a routine thing. Then, there was a listening device in the bag. We believe he installed it in the back room near the stairs. We're sending someone to remove it in the next hour under a different cover. She read the messages twice. Then she typed, he was listening for Noah. The response took longer than it should have. Then, we think so. Elena put the phone face down on the counter. She stood in her bookstore and looked at the backroom doorway and thought about a man who picked up children's books and set them down precisely where he'd found them, and about a maintenance inspector who'd counted 6 seconds on a staircase, and about the specific way power works when it decides you are a pressure point on someone it wants to destroy. She picked up her phone. She called Damien. He picked up before the first ring finished. I want to meet with you tonight, she said. Not a corner. Somewhere inside. Bring everything you have on Victor Crow. A pause. Elena. I'm not running, she said. I told you that, and I meant it, but I've been operating on information that's 11 days old, and he's been inside my building, and I need to know everything, all of it, whatever you've been holding back because you thought it would upset me. Silence. There are things, he said carefully, that are going to be hard to hear. I'm aware. Her voice was very steady. I've been hard to frighten my whole life. That's not the same thing as being hard to prepare. Another silence, longer. My place on the north side, he said. 8 o'clock. I'll have Reyes send you the address. Fine, she said. She ended the call and spent the rest of the afternoon serving customers and recommending books, and smiling at a toddler who knocked over a display, and apologizing to the toddler's mother, and generally being a person who ran a bookstore on a normal Thursday. At 5, she went upstairs and made dinner and sat across the table from Noah while he told her about a dispute at recess involving a ball and a misunderstanding about boundary lines, his voice going emphatic and his hands drawing diagrams in the air. She watched his hands. She watched the compass at his throat catch the kitchen light. She thought about a listening device in a canvas bag and a man counting seconds on a staircase and 47 seconds on a phone call to a property management company. She thought, he came here because Noah exists? Victor Crow is using my son as leverage because my son's father is the one thing standing between Victor and what he wants. She thought, that means this ends one of 2 ways. She helped Noah with his reading homework. She put him to bed. She told him the wolf story he liked, the one she'd memorized from the book so she could tell it without the pages. She kissed his forehead. She went downstairs, put on her coat, and walked out into the Chicago night toward a meeting that was going to change the shape of everything that came after. She didn't know yet that Damien had a recording. She didn't know what was on it. She was about to find out that the worst part of the truth wasn't what Victor Crow had done. It was what the recording made it sound like Damien had done instead. The address Reyes sent her was a building on the north side that looked, from the outside, like a converted warehouse. Brick face, no signage, windows that were dark from the street but lit from behind heavy curtains. A man she didn't know held the door without speaking and led her through a corridor that smelled like old wood and something industrial underneath it, and then through a second door into a room that surprised her. It was not what she'd expected from Damien Vale's private space. There was a long table with papers spread across it, a lamp in the corner throwing warm light, two chairs that didn't match, a shelf along one wall with books that had been actually read, spines cracked, pages bent, some of them stacked horizontally, the way people stack books when shelving becomes secondary to access. A coffee maker on a side table with a mug already made and waiting. The room felt like a place where a person actually worked, not like a place designed to impress anyone. Damien was standing at the table when she came in. He had his jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbow, and he was looking at a photograph pinned to the board behind the table. He turned when he heard her. "You made it," he said. "I said I would." He looked at her for a moment, taking in whatever he saw, the coat, the expression, the specific quality of her stillness, and then he pulled out the chair nearest her. She didn't sit immediately. She looked at the board behind him first. Photographs, printed documents, a map of the city with locations marked in red marker, strings connecting certain points. Victor Crow's face in 3 different photographs at 3 different ages. The most recent showing a man in his 60s with careful gray hair and the kind of neutral expression that cost a lot of effort to maintain. "He looks like someone's accountant," she said. "That's the point," Damien said. She sat down. He sat across from her. He'd laid everything out in order. The financial records, the surveillance logs, the transcripts of the 4 phone calls Victor had made after finding out about the Monroe meeting, the property management connection, the confirmation that Mello's device had been recovered from the back room wall 2 hours earlier by one of Damien's men posing as an electrician. She read through everything he put in front of her. She read carefully, the way she'd read everything since she was a child. Not quickly, not performing comprehension, actually absorbing it. He didn't rush her. He refilled her coffee without asking. When she was done, she sat back. "You said there were things that would be hard to hear," she said. "Yes. This isn't all of it." Not a question. He met her eyes. "No," he said. He reached into a folder she hadn't noticed under the edge of the table and placed a small digital recorder between them. "I need you to listen to something. I need you to listen to the whole thing before you say anything. Can you do that?" "What is it?" "It's a recording Victor sent to 3 members of my inner circle 2 days after the Monroe meeting. He sent it as a file, no message, just the audio." Damien's hand rested flat on the table beside the recorder. Not touching it, just near it. "He's had it for an unknown length of time. We don't know when it was made." Elena looked at the recorder. "Play it," she said. He pressed play. The recording was 41 seconds long. The audio quality was slightly uneven, the kind of quality that came from a room recording rather than a direct line. Ambient sound underneath, the faint suggestion of air movement, footsteps at the beginning and then stillness. Then a voice she recognized as Damien's, younger, the particular register of his 20s, when his voice had a different weight to it. He said, "I need her gone. Not complicated, not drawn out. I need her to disappear from my life completely, and I need her to believe it was her choice." A second voice, harder to identify, said something low that was partially obscured. Damien's voice again. "She knows too much, and she doesn't know she knows it. That's the dangerous kind. Handle it before it becomes a problem. I can't clean up. Click. End of recording." The silence in the room was total. Elena didn't move. She was aware of very specific physical details. The grain of the table under her left hand, the weight of her coat on the back of the chair, the lamp in the corner throwing Damien's face into partial shadow on the left side. She was aware of her own breathing, which had gone very shallow, and of the particular quality of stillness that comes before something breaks. She looked at Damien. He was watching her. His face was open in a way she hadn't seen from him yet. No control, No management, just the raw version of whatever was happening underneath. Elena, don't. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. She cleared her throat. Don't talk yet. He closed his mouth. She played the recording again in her head. 41 seconds. I need her gone. She knows too much, and she doesn't know she knows it. When was it made? She said. We believe 8 years ago. Approximately the same period as my disappearance. You believe. We can't verify the date from the file metadata. Victor could have altered it. He's technically capable of that, or he has people who are. But you can't prove he altered it. Not yet. She looked at him. Is it your voice? The question sat in the room. Damien did not look away. It sounds like my voice, he said. I cannot tell you with absolute certainty that it isn't. I have no memory of saying those words. I have no memory of any conversation that resembles that recording, but I cannot prove a negative. That's not an answer. I know. Did you say it? Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. Yes or no? Did you order someone to make me disappear? He looked at her for a long moment. No, he said. I did not. You sound sure. I am sure. But you just told me you can't prove it. Those two things can both be true, he said. I can know with certainty what I did and didn't do and still be unable to prove it to you. His voice was low and level. I understand that's insufficient. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm telling you what's true. Elena stood up. She walked to the window. The curtain was heavy, and she didn't push it aside. She just stood near it with her back to him, looking at the fabric. 8 years ago, I need her gone. 8 years ago, she'd taken a pregnancy test and sat on a bathroom floor. 8 years ago, she'd called his number 14 times over 3 days and gotten nothing. If he fabricated it, she said without turning around, he had to have your voice from somewhere. Yes. From recordings of you, things you actually said. Yes, that's the most likely method. So the words came from you, even if the conversation didn't happen. That's possible. She turned around. What did you actually say? In whatever conversation he pulled those words from. Damien was quiet for a moment. We have a theory, he said carefully. There was a situation approximately 8 years ago involving a woman named Carla Denis. She was a bookkeeper for the Delaney organization who had approached me independently. She wanted out. She had information. She was willing to trade. I was told she was also leaking information back to Delaney to protect herself. I told Victor at the time that I needed her to disappear from my life and my business before she became a problem I couldn't clean up. The room was very still. He recorded that conversation, Elena said. We believe so. We believe he cut and reconstructed it. To sound like you were talking about me. Yes, Elena breathed. She breathed carefully, the way you breathe when something is happening in your chest that you don't want to hand control to. And he sent this to your inner circle, she said, 3 days ago, 2 days after Monroe. To discredit you. To make the people closest to me question whether I'm the man they've been following or whether I'm the man on that recording. He paused. It's a smart move. He doesn't need to win. He just needs to introduce enough doubt that my organization loses coherence. Has it worked? Damien's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. 2 of the 3 people who received the file haven't responded to my messages since. Elena absorbed this. So he's cutting your organization out from under you, she said, using a recording that makes you sound like you ordered. She stopped. She couldn't quite finish the sentence. And he wants me to hear it too. He wants to destroy whatever is forming between us because that's the other thing threatening him. She looked at him directly. You and me being on the same side. That's what he can't afford. Damien said nothing, but she saw it in his face, the confirmation, the relief that she'd gotten there herself, and underneath both of those, something more complicated that she didn't have the vocabulary for yet. You should have told me about the recording before I came here, she said. I know, I was afraid. Don't. She shook her head. I don't want to hear what you were afraid of. That's how people make decisions that cost other people 8 years. Her voice went sharp on the last 3 words, and she watched him take it without flinching. You don't get to manage my reactions. Whatever this is between us, whatever it's becoming, it works on information or it doesn't work. Are we clear? Clear, he said. Good. She sat back down. She pulled the recorder toward her. Play it again. I want to listen to where the edit points might be. He blinked. You want to? I worked in a recording studio for 2 years after college, before the bookstore. I know what spliced audio sounds like, and I know what the artifacts sound like if it's been done in a hurry. She looked at him. Play it again. He played it again. She listened with her eyes closed, her head tilted slightly, the way she used to sit in the booth when a mix was being run. 41 seconds. She asked him to play it 3 more times. He played it 3 more times without comment. On the 4th pass, she opened her eyes. There, she said. 4 seconds in. The ambient sound drops slightly and then comes back. It's subtle, but it's there. And at 22 seconds, between disappear and from my life, there's a tiny gap. Less than 1/10 of a second. Sounds like breath. It isn't. It's a splice point. Damien was staring at her. I'm not an expert, she said, but a forensic audio analyst would find those in about 20 minutes. He reached across the table and took the recorder from her hand. He was very controlled about it, very deliberate, but she noticed that his hand wasn't entirely steady when he picked it up. He called Sasha. It was nearly 10 at night, and Sasha answered on the 2nd ring, which told Elena something about what the last week had been like for the people around Damien. He explained what Elena had found. He used very few words. He gave Sasha 48 hours to find an analyst. When he ended the call, he looked at Elena across the spread of documents and photographs and the remnants of whatever the night had been supposed to be. I don't know how to, he started. Don't, she said, for the 3rd time tonight. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because he put a listening device in my building near my son's staircase. And if forensic evidence of fabrication takes Victor Crow apart, then that's in Noah's interest. That's the only math I'm running right now. Okay, he said. Okay, she said back. They sat in the quiet of the converted warehouse room, and then she picked up the map with the red markers and said, Walk me through the locations. I want to understand the physical picture. He walked her through the locations. It was past midnight when she put on her coat. Reyes was going to drive her back. She was at the door when something made her stop. Some instinct, some catch in the texture of the silence. What aren't you telling me? She said. She didn't turn around. She was looking at the closed door. Behind her, she heard him exhale. A real one. The kind that comes out when someone has been holding something for a long time. Victor reached out to me directly, he said. Tonight, before you arrived. She turned around. He sent a message through an intermediary. 1 sentence. Damien's face was very still. He said, Tell Ms. Voss that the inspection found everything it was looking for. The cold went through her cleanly, top to bottom. He knows the device was pulled, she said. Yes. Which means he had eyes on my building even after Mello left. Yes. Which means he knows I came here tonight. Elena, he knows where I am right now. She heard her own voice go flat in the way it went flat when fear burned through and left something harder underneath. He wanted me to come here. He wanted me inside your circle. Because if I'm associated with you, you become a target in a different way. Not just as leverage. Damien crossed the room toward her. I know, I realized it 40 minutes after you arrived, and I've been trying to decide how to tell you. You should have led with it. I know. Damien. She looked at him. He was 2 feet away, close enough that she could see the exact degree of tension in his jaw, doing the thing they did when he was working very hard to stay contained. If you wanted me inside your circle, then everything tonight was already planned. The maintenance inspection, the device, sending me the photo of the bag, leading me here. She worked through it out loud. He's been moving us like pieces. Yes. His voice was quiet. That's what I believe. To what end? A pause. We think he wants to create a situation where you and Noah are under my protection formally and visibly, Damien said. Because then he can use both of you to force my hand. He can threaten Noah and you in a way that's not just leverage over me, but a public demonstration of my vulnerability. In front of my organization. In front of every rival who's been watching to see if the recording destabilized me. He stopped. He wants to show everyone that the only thing Damien Vale can't protect is the thing that matters most to him. The silence was very complete. He knows about Noah, Elena said. He's always known. I think that's why he went to your store before I ever came back. He'd been tracking it since he found out I'd seen you on Clement Street. He just waited to deploy it. Elena's hand was on the door. She was aware of it, the brass handle cool under her palm. And she was aware of the room behind her and the man standing in the middle of it. And she was aware of the very specific arithmetic of what she was holding. A child who went to school on Damen and had a reading group on Wednesdays, and didn't know that anyone in the world had any interest in using him for anything. "I need to go home," she said. "Reyes will take you. There will be coverage on the building all night." "That's not—" She stopped, started again. "I need to go home because I need to be in the same building as my son. That's all. I need to be there." "I understand." She opened the door. "Elena." His voice stopped her. She didn't turn. "I'm going to end this. I want you to know that. Whatever it costs me. However I have to do it. I'm going to end it." She stood in the doorway for a moment. "You said that before," she said, "about protecting us." "I know. Victor's been 3 steps ahead of you since the Monroe meeting." "A beat." "Yes. So whatever you're planning, he's already planning around it." She turned halfway, just enough to see him in her peripheral vision. "That means you need to do the thing he won't plan around. The thing he can't predict because it doesn't fit the man he thinks you are." She walked out. She was in the car with Reyes, moving through the late-night streets, before she understood what she'd just said. She sat with it the whole drive home. The thing he won't plan around. The thing that doesn't fit the man he thinks you are. Sasha called Damien at 2 in the morning. "The 2 men who went silent after the recording," she said. "I found them." "Good." "Damien." A pause in her voice that he didn't like. "I found them because they reached out to Victor, not to us. They've been in contact with him since yesterday morning." The information landed. "Which 2?" he said. She told him. One of them he'd known for 9 years. The other had been present at his father's funeral. "Sit on it," he said. Don't move on either of them yet. I need to know if they're passing him information actively or just keeping options open." "There's something else." Of course there was. "Victor's intermediary contacted 2 people outside our organization tonight," Sasha said. "The Delaney Group, which we expected, and a woman named Karen Pollard, who is a senior investigator with the city's organized crime task force." Damien was very still. "He's going to the authorities," he said. "Not exactly. Karen Pollard isn't clean. She's been on Victor's payroll for 3 years. We have circumstantial evidence of that. Nothing solid. We think he's using her to preposition something. A case, a warrant, documentation. Something that drops at a specific moment to create maximum disruption." "To what?" Sasha was quiet for a moment. "We intercepted a partial message. Just a fragment. The line was encrypted and we only got the tail end of it. It said, 'Before the boys' school opens on Monday.'" The room Damien was standing in seemed to get smaller. Monday was 4 days away. "What does that mean?" he said. "We don't know yet. It could be a timing marker, something to happen before Monday. Or it could be specific to the school, to Noah." Damien's jaw was tight enough to ache. "Get me everything you have on Karen Pollard. Every contact, every payment, every case she's touched in the last 3 years. I need it by morning." He paused. "And I need you to find out what Victor is prepositioned to release and to whom." "If it's city authorities, I know." He knew what it meant. If Victor was about to hand fabricated evidence to a law enforcement contact, then Monday wasn't just a threat to Noah's routine. Monday was the moment Victor tried to neutralize Damien through institutional means, arrest, seizure, public exposure, while simultaneously moving on Elena and Noah directly. 2 fronts at once, personal and institutional. Damien put down the phone. He stood in the empty room with the lamp in the corner and the document spread on the table and the map with the red markers, and thought about a woman who'd said the thing he won't plan around and then walked out into the dark. He thought about what Victor expected him to do. Victor expected him to move aggressively, to pull his remaining loyal people together, to strike before Monday, to try to intercept the information before it reached Karen Pollard. That was the Damien Vale move. Direct, forceful, surgical. Victor had planned around that. Victor had 2 men inside his inner circle and a law enforcement contact and the Delaney Group already activated. A direct strike before Monday would walk right into all 3. So Damien needed to do the thing that didn't fit the man Victor thought he was. He stood very still for a long time. Then he picked up his phone. He didn't call Sasha. He didn't call Reyes. He called a number he had been carrying in his phone for 2 years without using, a number belonging to a journalist named Marcus Webb, who worked for a financial publication that covered organized crime from an economic angle, who had been trying to reach Damien for 18 months, and who had a reputation for being precise, patient, and honest about his methodology. The call went to voicemail. Damien left a message. He said, "My name is Damien Vale. You've been trying to reach me for a while. I have documents that will interest you significantly. I'm not available for comment in the usual way, but I'm available for a different kind of conversation. Call me back before 8 in the morning." He ended the call. He picked up the financial records. The originals Elena had kept in the storage unit on Kedzie for 8 years. The documents she'd held onto because she thought he'd come back for them. The documents that constituted 14 years of evidence against Victor Crow. He looked at them for a long time. Victor was going to use institutional channels against Damien on Monday. Damien was going to use those same channels against Victor first, but not through law enforcement he couldn't trust. Through the one mechanism Victor had never thought to compromise, because Victor didn't understand that the most permanent kind of exposure wasn't a criminal charge. It was a financial story with documentation, published by someone credible, the morning before you expected to make your move. Damien set the documents down. He sat in the chair and looked at the ceiling and thought about how Elena had listened to the recording 4 times and found the edit points that an audio expert would confirm in 20 minutes. He thought about her saying, "That's how people make decisions that cost other people 8 years." He thought about what Monday might cost if he got this wrong. His phone rang. Marcus Webb. 12 minutes after the voicemail. Damien picked up. "Mr. Vale," Webb said. He sounded alert for 2 in the morning, the way journalists sounded when something had cracked open. "This is unexpected." "I know." "You said you have documents." "I have 14 years of financial records showing systematic misdirection, payments to rival organizations, and the construction of a shadow operation inside the Vale Company by a man named Victor Crow." Damien's voice was level. "I also have audio evidence of fabrication that I'll have forensically verified within 48 hours. A pause. "You understand this implicates your organization as well?" "Yes." He paused. "I'm prepared for that." "That's—" Webb stopped. "Mr. Vale, why are you doing this?" Damien looked at the table, at the documents, the map, the lamp throwing its warm light across the whole arrangement. "Because there's a 7-year-old boy," he said, "who has a reading group on Wednesdays, and I am done letting the wrong people make decisions about what his life looks like." Webb was quiet for a moment. "Tell me about the documents," he said. Damien told him. Outside in the Chicago night, 4 days before Monday, the city kept its own pace. Indifferent, constant, full of the particular noise of a place that had seen everything and would outlast anyone trying to control any part of it. Inside the room on the north side, a man who had spent his life being what other people feared was in the process of becoming something Victor Crow had never once considered planning around. The question was whether 4 days was enough. Marcus Webb published at 6:47 Friday morning. The piece ran under a financial investigations header with a title that was deliberately dry: Vale Organization Finances, Show. Systemic misdirection spanning 14 years. And beneath the clinical headline was 14 months of documentation laid out with the precision of someone who understood that the most devastating stories didn't need dramatic language because the facts did the work themselves. By 7:15, it had been read 11,000 times. By 8, the number was 43,000. Damien knew the exact moment Victor saw it because Sasha's surveillance team picked up 4 simultaneous outgoing calls from Victor's building at 8:02. All 4 to different numbers, all 4 less than 90 seconds long, the pattern of a man rapidly reassessing a situation that had just inverted on him. Damien was already moving by then. He'd slept 2 hours on the couch in the North Side building, suit jacket folded under his head, and woken at 5 with the specific alertness of someone whose nervous system had decided sleep was a completed transaction. He'd read the draft Webb sent at 5:40. He'd made 3 calls. He'd eaten half a piece of bread standing over the kitchen counter and called it sufficient. He called Elena at 7. She picked up on the first ring. She'd been awake since 5:30. He could hear it in her voice. Not tired, past tired. The other side of tired where everything sharpens. "The article is out," he said. "I read it." A pause. "When did you decide to do this?" "After you left Thursday night." You said the thing he won't plan around. I know. I didn't mean, she stopped. I didn't mean expose your entire organization to financial scrutiny. I know what you meant. He paused. It was still the right move. A longer silence. Outside his window, the city was beginning its morning noise, trucks, distant horns, the rhythm of a place getting started. What happens now? She said. Now Victor has three options. He goes quiet and absorbs the damage, which is not in his nature. He escalates directly, moves on me or on you before the story solidifies. Or he tries to use Karen Pollard to generate a legal counter-narrative fast enough to reframe the story before the weekend news cycle picks it up. Which one? He'll do 2 and 3 simultaneously, Damien said, which is why I need you to take Noah somewhere today. Not far, not permanently, just today and tonight. A beat. Your sister's, he said. She's in Evanston. Noah likes it there. She went quiet long enough that he couldn't read it. You know about my sister. I told you I investigated after the bookstore. I'm sorry. It was, don't apologize for it right now, she said. Call me when something happens. She paused. And Damien, if this goes wrong today, it won't. I'm not finished. Her voice was very level. If it goes wrong, I need you to know that I need you to know some things, but I'm not saying them on the phone, so don't let it go wrong. He held the phone. Okay, he said. She ended this call. He stood with the phone in his hand for 3 seconds. Then he put it in his pocket and picked up his coat and went to find Reyes. Oh. The first escalation came at 9:18. Garrett, the man Damien had known for 9 years, one of the two who'd gone quiet after the recording, walked into the Monroe location at 9:15 with 2 men Damien didn't recognize and told the woman at the front that he needed access to the lower floor files. The woman at the front called Sasha. Sasha called Damien. Damien was 4 minutes away. He walked into Monroe at 9:22. Garrett was in the corridor outside the file room with one of the 2 men. The other was presumably inside. Garrett turned when he heard footsteps, and his face did something complicated. Not quite guilt, not quite defiance. The specific expression of someone who has made a decision. They're not sure they can defend, but intends to stand behind it anyway. Damien, Garrett said. Who are these men? Damien said. They're with me. That's not what I asked. A pause. They're there to make sure the transfer happens cleanly. What transfer? Garrett exhaled through his nose. He was 61 years old, had more weight on him than he'd carried 5 years ago, and had the look of a man who hadn't slept well since the recording arrived in his inbox. Victor has documentation that contradicts the web piece. He wants the Vail financial records as verification of his counterclaim. Victor sent you here. I'm acting in the organization's interest. You're acting on Victor Crow's instruction inside my building. Damien's voice was very quiet. That quietness had a specific effect on people who knew him well. Garrett felt it, and his shoulders moved back slightly. Instinctive, the body knowing something before the brain caught up. Garrett, how long? How long what? How long has he had you? A silence. 6 months, Garrett said. He came to me after your father's anniversary. He had information about the Seville account that would have been bad for me if it came out. I made a calculation. 6 months, Damien said. Damien, I have known you since you were 19 years old. I watched you grow up. I want you to know that I have not. Stop. Damien held up one hand. I need you to tell your men to step away from the file room. Then I need you to sit down in the front room and wait for me. Can you do those 2 things? Garrett looked at him. He'll come after me if I don't deliver, Garrett said. I know. He has people. I know what he has. Damien met his eyes. But right now you're in my building, which means right now you're under my roof. And nothing happens to anyone under my roof while I'm standing in it. You know that. Something moved through Garrett's face. Old, specific, the kind of recognition that lives in a relationship built over decades. He turned to the man beside him and said something low, and the man went to the file room door and knocked twice, and the second man came out, and both of them moved to the far end of the corridor. Garrett went to the front room. Damien stood in the corridor for a moment with his hand against the file room door. Then his phone went off. Reyes. Sasha needs you. Now. The Pollard situation moved. Karen Pollard had not waited for Monday. The warrant came through at 9:58 Friday morning. Financial records, communications, access to 3 Vale organization properties. Signed by a judge Damien's team had no prior intelligence on, which meant either Victor had a second contact they hadn't identified or the documentation Webb published had provided enough legitimate probable cause that Pollard hadn't needed to lean on her usual angles. Either way, it was real. Sasha pulled Damien into the back room at Monroe with a printed copy and a face that had the specific flatness of someone managing controlled urgency. 3 properties, she said. This building is one of them. Damien read the warrant. He read it twice. Timeline, he said. The warrant was issued 40 minutes ago. Standard execution gives them up to 24 hours, but Pollard will move today. She'll want to be inside these properties before the weekend changes the news cycle dynamic. How long do we have? Realistically, 2 to 4 hours. Damien looked at the warrant. He looked at Sasha. He thought about Victor making 4 phone calls at 8:02. Not panicked calls, he understood now. Orchestration calls. The Webb piece hadn't destabilized Victor's plan. It had accelerated it. He wanted the story to run, Damien said. Sasha blinked. What? The story. He wanted it to run this morning. He knew I was talking to Webb, or he suspected it, and he let it happen because the story legitimizes Pollard's warrant. It gives her a public interest angle that makes the warrant unassailable. Damien set the paper down. I thought I was moving before him. I was moving exactly where he wanted me. The room was quiet. What do we do? Sasha said. Where are the originals? Damien said. Elena's documents. Victor's financial records. Safe house on Wicker Park. Reyes has them. Get them to Webb directly. Physical copies today, before Pollard executes the warrant. If the original documents are in a journalist's possession, they're protected from seizure, Sasha said. She understood immediately. Source material in an active journalistic investigation. She can't touch them without a separate process that takes weeks. Move now, Damien said. Reyes goes directly to Webb's office, hand delivery, signed receipt. Sasha was already on the phone as she left the room. Damien called Webb. Webb picked up. I was expecting your call. You've seen the warrant. It hit my desk 12 minutes ago. I have a legal team that does nothing but watch for exactly this kind of response. Webb's voice was measured. Mr. Vale, I need to ask you directly. Is there anything in the documents you gave me that will create a problem for my publication? The documents are authentic. Every record, every date, every payment. My organization's involvement is real, and I'm not asking you to obscure it. You're not asking me to protect you. I'm asking you to protect the truth. Those are different things. A pause. My man Reyes will be at your office within the hour with the original physical documents. I'll be here, Webb said. Damien ended the call. He walked to the front room. Garrett was sitting in a chair by the window, his hands in his lap, looking like a man who had aged several years in 40 minutes. The 2 unfamiliar men were gone. Damien's people had quietly moved them to a separate room sometime in the last half hour. Victor is going to know you didn't deliver, Damien said. I know. He'll move on you. I know that too. Garrett looked up. What are you going to do? What I should have done 2 years ago, Damien said, but faster. The call from Reyes came at 11:40. He was 3 blocks from Webb's office when the car behind him made a move. Not aggressive, nothing visible from the street, nothing that looked like anything from the outside. But Reyes had been doing this long enough to recognize the specific pattern of a tail that had decided to become a stop. The speed adjustment, the way the second car closed the gap by a precise amount and held it. He called Damien while still driving. I've got a problem, he said. Damien heard the tone and went straight. Where? Wacker approaching Michigan. 2 cars. Professional gap management. They're not trying to stop me, they're trying to direct me. Direction toward what? A pause as Reyes processed the street ahead. There's a parking structure on my left. If I take the next right, I go past it. If they close the gap on that turn, don't take the right. I'm not taking the right. The documents are in a bag on the seat. Damien, if they stop this car, it's over. Pollard gets the documents before Webb. Damien was moving before Reyes finished the sentence, coat on, phone pressed to his ear, out of Monroe and into the street. Keep me on the line, he said. Sasha. He turned to Sasha, who was 2 steps behind him. Get me a car. A car was already there. Sasha had anticipated it by about 30 seconds, which was her consistent margin. Reyes, Damien said, getting in. What's your current position? Wacker in Michigan. The second car is alongside me now. Left lane. Don't stop. Don't make contact. Drive toward the Riverwalk. There'll be too many pedestrians for them to do anything visible. They're not trying to be visible, Reyes said. They're trying to box me. The third car came from a side street. Reyes saw it a second before it completed the geometry. Left car, rear car, and now a car at his right front diagonal, all three moving in coordination, closing the box at a speed that was measured to be just under the threshold of aggression. They weren't going to stop him with force. They were going to stop him with geometry, slow him to a halt in traffic, and then someone was going to tap on the window with an official-looking credential and ask to see the bag. Victor's man Pollard could not seize documents from a moving vehicle on a public street, but documents transferred from a vehicle during a lawful traffic stop to a law enforcement officer, even a compromised one, would be a different conversation. Reyes said, "I'm going to do something you might not like." Damien said, "What?" Reyes said, "I'm going to get out of the car." He pulled to the curb on Michigan Avenue in front of a hotel with a doorman and morning foot traffic and a line of taxis, and he got out of the car with the bag over his shoulder, and he walked into the hotel lobby at a normal pace like a man who had somewhere to be. The three cars could not simultaneously park on Michigan Avenue without creating an incident. Reyes walked through the lobby to the rear exit on the cross street. He got into a cab. He called Damien from the cab. "I'm mobile," he said. 20 minutes from Webb's office. Damien exhaled once, controlled. "Good," he said. "The car is still on Michigan," Reyes said. "They'll find it in 10 minutes. 10 minutes is enough." He paused. "Nice move with the hotel." "I learned from watching you," Reyes said. "You always said geometry is only a trap if you accept the geometry." Damien ended the call. The driver looked at him in the rear-view mirror. "Where to?" Damien thought for half a second. "The abandoned Vale building," he said. "On Fulton." The driver pulled out. Damien watched Chicago move past the window, the lake in the distance, the grid of streets, the city going about its Friday with no awareness of what was converging inside it. His phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. He picked up anyway, because the day had a quality to it now that required picking up unknown numbers. "Mr. Vale," said a voice he recognized immediately despite never having spoken to the man directly. Precise diction, older, with the faint flatness of someone who had spent decades making sure their voice revealed nothing. "This is Victor Crow." Damien said nothing. "I thought it was time we spoke directly," Victor said, "given the morning's events." "Given that your box maneuver failed," Damien said. A small pause. "A setback, not a failure. There's a distinction." Another pause. "I want to suggest a meeting, just the two of us. No intermediaries, no backup. The Fulton building. You're on your way there now, I believe." The cold moved through Damien cleanly. "You have eyes on my car," he said. "I've had eyes on several of your cars for quite a long time." A beat. "It's not a threat, Mr. Vale. It's an illustration of why a direct conversation is the more efficient path. I know where you are. You know where I am, or you will shortly. The geometry, as you like to say, has simplified." "You want to negotiate," Damien said. "I want to have a conversation about what happens next. For both of us." Victor's voice was very even. "Bring the documents if you like, or don't. The conversation is the point." "And if I don't come?" A pause. "There is a school on Damon Avenue," Victor said, "where a boy named Noah attends a reading group on Wednesday evenings." Damien's hand tightened on the phone. "I know his teacher's name," Victor continued. "I know which bus he sometimes takes when his mother is running late. I know that he wears a compass necklace that belonged to your mother and that he has your eyes, which must be striking to see." The voice didn't change tempo, didn't add heat. It was the most dangerous kind of threat, the kind delivered in the same tone you'd use to describe the weather. "I have no interest in harming a child. I want that to be clear. But I am a man who uses the tools available to him, and the tools available to me this morning are significant." Damien breathed. One breath. "Fulton building," he said. 1 hour. He ended the call. He sat in the car for a moment. His hand on his knee was absolutely still. That stillness cost him something. He could feel the cost of it, the effort, the specific price of keeping everything internal while the thing in his chest was doing what it was doing. He called Elena. She picked up on the first ring. What happened? Is Noah with you? We're at my sister's. He's in the backyard. What happened, Damien? Victor called me directly, he said. He wants a meeting. Fulton Building, 1 hour. That's a trap. Yes. Then why are you going? Because he mentioned Noah by name, Damien said. His teacher, his bus, his necklace. He heard her sharp intake of breath. I'm going because the alternative is not knowing what he's deploying and when. If I'm in the room with him, I have information. I have the ability to read what he's actually planning, which is never exactly what he says it is. You could be walking into, I know what I'm walking into. Damien. Her voice went to the place it went, flat, controlled, the fear burned through and the hard thing underneath. I need you to come back from this. He closed his eyes for half a second. I know, he said. I'm not saying it for me. A pause. Well, I'm saying it for both of us. But Noah, her voice cracked slightly on the word, the first time he'd heard it crack, and the sound of it did something to his chest that he didn't have time for and also couldn't ignore. He asked me this morning why we were at Aunt Susan's on a school day. I told him it was an adventure. He said adventures are usually somebody's idea, and whose idea was this? He's 7 years old and he already knows when an adult isn't telling him the full story. Damien sat in the car on the way to a building that had his family name on the outside and a man inside it who had spent 14 years using the people Damien trusted against him. Tell him, Damien said, that it was my idea, and that I'll explain it when I see him. A beat. Okay, Elena said. Elena. He stopped. Say it, she said. When this is over, I would like... He stopped again. He was not a man who said these things easily. He was in the back of a car on the way to a confrontation that could go any number of ways, and he was suddenly aware of the enormous and specific weight of every unspoken thing he'd been carrying since a rainy night in a bookstore. I would like to take Noah somewhere he wants to go, and I would like you to come, and I would like that to be the beginning of something rather than a transaction. The silence was very brief. Go deal with Victor Crow, she said. And then we'll talk about Noah's idea of where he wants to go, because I promise you it will be somewhere impractical involving wolves. Despite everything, something in Damien's chest eased by a fraction. Okay, he said. He ended the call. The Fulton building had been empty for 3 years. It had been the operational center of the Vale organization for 11 years before that. 4 floors, loading dock at the rear, service corridors that Damien knew the layout of the way. You knew the layout of a place you'd grown up working in. He went in through the main entrance because Victor had eyes on his car, and there was no point in pretending otherwise. The building smelled like absence, dust and the memory of industrial heat, and something faintly chemical from the old freight operation. The main floor was stripped, furniture gone, equipment gone, only the bones of the place remaining. High ceilings, exposed structural elements, the late morning light coming through grimy windows and long, pale bars. Victor was on the 2nd floor. Damien heard him before he saw him. Footsteps on the metal landing, deliberate, unhurried. The footsteps of a man who had arrived early and set up the room the way he wanted it, and was now waiting with the patience of someone who had been waiting for a very long time for this specific conversation. He was standing at a window when Damien reached the top of the stairs. Gray suit, precise posture, hands clasped behind his back. He looked like an architect reviewing a property. He turned when Damien stepped onto the landing. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Victor Crow was 63 years old and looked like the version of 63 where the years had clarified rather than eroded. Sharp eyes, the unhurried expression, the particular quality of a man who had never once in his life been surprised by something he hadn't already considered. You came, Victor said. You made a compelling argument, Damien said. I mentioned a child. Yes, I meant what I said about not wanting to harm him. Victor moved away from the window, not toward Damien. A lateral move, measured, the way you moved in a space when you wanted to establish that you were comfortable in it. I want you to believe that. You put a listening device in the wall near his staircase, Damien said. Information gathering, not harm. The distinction is academic from where I stand. Most important distinctions appear academic until they aren't. Victor stopped at a point roughly equidistant from the window and the staircase. He looked at Damien directly. You spoke to Marcus Webb. You know I did. I know. I also know the documents are now in Webb's possession, which makes the warrant complicated. He paused. You're a faster learner than I gave you credit for, Mr. Vale. Your father had the same quality. He moved laterally when everyone expected forward movement. Something shifted in his expression. I respected Thomas. I want you to know that. What I did was not personal. My father's funeral, Damien said. You delivered a eulogy about loyalty. Yes. And you'd been moving money out of his organization for 6 months before he got sick. A beat. 8 months, actually. Victor's voice was unchanged. I want to be accurate. The thing in Damien's chest that he'd been managing since the phone call went very hot and very still at the same time. He'd known this fact. He'd read it in the documents. Knowing it and hearing the man say it in the same tone he'd used to eulogize Thomas Vale were different experiences. What do you want? Damien said. A practical conversation, Victor said. The documents are with Webb. The warrant is complicated. Karen Pollard is no longer useful to me in the immediate term. She'll distance herself from this before the weekend because she's a practical woman. He paused. What I want is not what I wanted 3 days ago. 3 days ago, I wanted control of your organization. That path has closed. So what's left? Exit, Victor said simply. Clean, complete, and quiet. I walk away from this city and from everything connected to the Vale name. I have resources enough to relocate permanently. I have no interest in continuing a conflict that has become more expensive than its potential return. He looked at Damien. I want you to let me leave. The building was very quiet. In exchange for what? Damien said. In exchange for a recording that will destroy you. Victor reached into his jacket and removed a phone. He held it up, not moving toward Damien, just holding it where it was visible. Not the fabricated one I sent to your inner circle. That was theater. This is something else. He paused. This is a recording of a conversation between you and a man named Casper Mills, 18 months ago, in which you authorized a specific action that constitutes a federal crime. Your voice, unedited, in a room I had equipped without your knowledge. He let that land. I have kept this as insurance since the day I recorded it. I'm offering to hand it to you directly in exchange for a clear path out. Damien looked at the phone. He thought about Casper Mills, about the conversation Victor was describing, about the specific texture of 18 months ago, what the organization had been dealing with, what decisions had been made. He thought, he's not lying about this one. If I say no, Damien said, then the recording goes to Karen Pollard, who despite her current caution will respond to something this concrete, and also to 2 federal contacts whose names I'll provide to demonstrate I'm serious. Victor's voice remained even throughout. This is not theater. This is a transaction. Damien looked at the man who had spent 14 years moving through his family's organization like a slow leak, patient, precise, invisible, until the damage was structural. He looked at the phone. He thought about Noah's reading group, about Elena's voice cracking on his name, about a compass necklace catching kitchen light. He thought about what clean looked like from here and whether there was a version of it that didn't cost something irretrievable. He thought about what his father had built and what he himself had built on top of it, and what all of it added up to when you stood in the stripped bones of the building where it had operated and looked at the man who had been eating at it from the inside for 8 months before Thomas Vale got sick. The phone, Damien said, in exchange for a clear exit. That's the transaction, Victor said. Damien took 1 step forward, and that was when the door at the far end of the 2nd floor, the service corridor access, the one Victor had presumably used to enter, the one Damien had been tracking peripherally since he'd come up the stairs, opened from the outside. Sasha walked through it. Behind her were 2 people Damien had not expected to see. Marcus Webb, with a recorder in his hand and an expression of a man who was either very brave or had made a calculation about the news value of being in this specific room at this specific moment. And beside Webb, with her coat buttoned against the November cold she'd walked in from, and her jaw set in the particular way it set when she had decided something and was finished being argued with about it, Elena. Victor Crow turned. For the first time since Damien had walked into this building, the precise, unhurried face showed something that was not quite what he'd intended to show. Hello, Elena said. She looked at Victor the way you looked at something you'd been thinking about for a long time and had finally decided to look at directly. I think there's a conversation here that I should probably be part of. Victor looked from her to Damien. Damien looked at Elena. She met his eyes and gave him a small, very specific look that communicated approximately 6 things simultaneously, chief among them. I told you not to do this alone, and I meant it. The second thing it communicated was, Webb has been recording since the parking lot. The third was something he'd have to ask her about later, when they were somewhere that wasn't here, somewhere without Victor Crow and a phone containing a federal crime and 14 years of damage accumulated in the bones of a building that still had his family's name on the outside. Victor's hand tightened on the phone. Mr. Crow, Webb said from the doorway, his recorder held with the relaxed confidence of a man who understood exactly what he was holding and what it was worth. I wonder if you'd be willing to comment on the financial documentation published this morning and its relationship to the conversation I've just been listening to from the corridor. The building went absolutely silent, and Damien Vale, standing in the stripped-out second floor of everything he'd inherited and everything he'd built, and everything he was in the process of burning down to its correct size, looked at the woman who had walked into this room with her jaw set and her coat buttoned, who had kept a storage unit of documents for 8 years because she thought he'd come back for them, who had found splice points in a fabricated recording by ear in a warehouse at midnight. And he understood that this was the moment the thing shifted. Not toward him, not toward Victor, toward whatever came after, which was the only direction any of them had left. Victor Crow moved first, not toward Damien, not toward Webb and his recorder. He moved toward Elena, and he moved fast for a man of 63. 3 steps crossing the distance between his position and hers before anyone in the room had fully processed the geometry shifting, his hand coming up not with violence but with the phone, holding it between them like a piece of evidence in a trial he was still trying to run. This, he said to her, his voice stripped of its earlier precision, something rawer underneath now, does not involve you. Elena didn't step back. She looked at the phone. She looked at his face. She said very quietly, "You stood in my store and described my son's walk home from school. You put a listening device in the wall outside his bedroom. You've been using a 7-year-old child as a pressure point for weeks." She met his eyes directly. "Everything you've touched involves me." Victor's jaw tightened. It was the first visible crack in the controlled surface. Not anger, something more fundamental. The specific discomfort of a man who had spent decades operating in a world where the people around him responded to power, and was now standing in front of someone who had decided not to. Damien had moved the moment Victor moved. He was 2 steps away now, not grabbing, not escalating, just repositioning in the specific way that communicated. "This is the last time you move toward her." Webb was recording. He hadn't moved from the doorway. He was a professional, and he understood that the thing happening in this room was worth more recorded than interrupted. Sasha was by the staircase with her phone out, and Damien knew without looking that she was running her own documentation, photographs, timestamps, everything that would matter later in a process that was no longer Victor's to control. "Mr. Crow," Webb said again, his voice the even, unhurried tone of a man who had sat across tables from dangerous people before and understood that calm was its own form of leverage. "The recording I've been making since the parking structure will be submitted to my editorial team within the hour, regardless of what happens in this room. I'm giving you the opportunity to speak on the record before that happens." Victor turned to look at him. Something happened in his face during that turn. A calculation, rapid and visible to anyone watching closely enough. The specific expression of a man running a probability tree and arriving at an answer he didn't like. He had the phone with the Casper Mills recording. He had, or had believed he had, a path out. What he hadn't accounted for was a journalist with a recorder and a woman who'd walked into a building she had no strategic reason to be in except the most human one. He looked at Damien. "You brought them here," he said. "I didn't know they were coming," Damien said. It was true. Victor heard the truth in it. That particular flatness that couldn't be performed. And it made things worse for him, not better. Because if Damien hadn't orchestrated this, then it had happened on its own, which meant the situation had a momentum that wasn't controllable from any single point. "The recording on that phone," Damien said, "goes to Webb, now, along with whatever else you've been holding as insurance." He kept his voice very level. "Not as a negotiation. as the only version of this where you get to walk out of this building under your own power. Victor looked at him for a long moment. The Mills recording destroys you, Victor said. I know what it does. A federal charge. Your organization, what's left of it? I know, Damien said. Hand it over. The silence in the stripped-out second floor of the Fulton building was the kind of silence that had weight. Not empty, not peaceful, but full of the compressed mass of everything that had been moving toward this point for 14 years. The dust in the pale window light, the sound of the city outside, indifferent as always. Victor's hand, holding the phone, dropped an inch. Then another. He held it out. Damien took it. He looked at it for 1 second, at the screen, at the small icon indicating the audio file Victor had carried as his final guarantee for what appeared to be 18 months. And then he handed it directly to Webb, without looking away from Victor's face. Webb took it. Mr. Crow, Webb said, would you like to make a statement? Victor Crow straightened his jacket. He was 63 years old, and he had been, for 14 years, the most precisely dangerous person in the Vale organization, and none of that showed in his face right now. What showed was something older and more basic. The expression of a man who has played a very long game and arrived at the end of it in a room he didn't control. No, he said. He walked to the staircase. Sasha stepped aside to let him pass. She looked at Damien as she did it, a question in the look. Do I stop him? Damien shook his head once. Victor's footsteps went down the metal stairs, even and unhurried, and then across the main floor below, and then there was the sound of the door at the ground level, and then nothing. The room was quiet. Webb lowered his recorder. He looked at the phone in his other hand. He looked at Damien. The Mills recording, he said carefully. If I listen to this, you'll listen to it, Damien said, and you'll report what's on it. That's the arrangement. Webb blinked. Most people in your position would want to. I know what most people would want, Damien said. I'm not most people anymore. Or I'm trying not to be. He paused. Everything on that phone goes to your editorial team. Whatever they determine is in the public interest gets published. I won't obstruct it. Webb looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded, once, the nod of a man who had been doing this long enough to recognize the rarest version of the thing he was always looking for. I'll be in touch, Webb said. He glanced at Elena. Miss Voss. He left through the service corridor door, his footsteps steady on the stairs, and then he was gone too. The room held Damien, Elena, and Sasha. Sasha looked at both of them. She was a woman of exceptional professional judgment, and her professional judgment right now told her that the two people remaining in this room needed the third person to leave. I'll coordinate the Monroe situation, she said to Damien. Garrett's still in the front room. I know. Go easy on him, Damien said. He was scared. Sasha looked faintly surprised. Then she nodded and went down the stairs. Damien and Elena were alone in the second floor of the Fulton building. She was looking at the window, at the pale late morning light coming through the grime on the glass, at the city beyond it. Her coat was still buttoned. Her hands were at her sides. He could see the rise and fall of her breathing from where he stood, slightly faster than normal, the residue of adrenaline working its way out. You shouldn't have come, he said. I know. How did you get here? Susan drove me. She's downstairs with Noah in the car. She turned from the window. He wanted to come up. I told him the building wasn't safe. It isn't. I know. She looked at him directly. The specific quality of her look, the one she'd developed over 8 years of building something from nothing and raising someone alone and carrying a storage unit of documents because she'd decided to, not because anyone asked her to, that look had a weight to it that he felt physically. You were going to give Victor a clean exit, she said. I was negotiating. You were going to let him leave. I needed the Mills recording off that phone before it reached Pollard. The exit was the price. And then Webb and I walked in and you handed everything to Webb anyway, including the thing that hurts you. She paused. Why? I was quiet for a moment. Because it was the right thing, he said. That's not sufficient, she said. Try again. He exhaled. Because I've been the person who makes the calculation for 20 years, who trades this for that, who decides what the acceptable cost of a given outcome is, and who pays it without necessarily asking them. He looked at her. I made that calculation 8 years ago. I decided the acceptable cost of keeping you safe was you not knowing why I left. I decided what you could afford to know and what you couldn't. His voice stayed even, but it cost him something. That was wrong. Not the intent, the method. I don't get to decide anymore what people around me can handle. Elena looked at him for a long time. The Mills recording, she said. What's on it? Something I authorized that I shouldn't have. Something that was expedient at the time and that I told myself was necessary. He met her eyes. I won't minimize it. It was a crime and I made the call and now Webb has it. What happens to you? I don't know yet. Depends what Webb's team decides, what the federal threshold is, what the organization looks like by the time any of it reaches a formal process. He paused. I have attorneys. I have the financial records establishing Victor's 14-year campaign against my organization, which will provide context. I'm not going to pretend it makes the Mills thing disappear, because it doesn't. You might go to prison, she said. It's possible. Elena absorbed this with the particular steadiness of someone who has already done the math and arrived at the number before the conversation started. You handed Webb that phone knowing that, she said. Yes. Why? He looked at her, at the coat buttoned against the cold she'd walked through to get here, at the jaw set in the way he'd come to know meant she had made a decision and was finished negotiating with herself about it. Because there's a 7-year-old in a car downstairs, he said, who is going to grow up into something, and I want whatever he grows into to have been shaped by a father who, when the moment came, chose the true thing over the convenient thing. He paused. Even if I'm not around for all of it, the choice is still part of what he comes from. The light from the dirty window moved slightly. A cloud shifting outside, the pale bar of it crossing the floor between them. Elena walked across that light and stopped in front of him, close enough that he could see the exact texture of the decision in her face. Not romantic, not easy, not the resolved ending of something, but the complicated beginning of something else. She put her hand against his chest. Not an embrace, just her hand flat against his sternum, feeling the beat of the thing underneath. You have a lot of work ahead of you, she said. I know. Legal work. Organizational work. The work of being an actual person in someone's life instead of a managed presence. Her hand didn't move. I'm not promising you anything today. I want you to know that. I'm not standing here telling you it's going to be fine because I don't know if it's going to be fine. There's a recording on a journalist's phone that might change your next several years. I know. But I'm standing here, she said. That's what I have right now. I'm standing here. He put his hand over hers. Not pressing, not holding, just covering it. That's enough, he said. They stood in the second floor of the empty Fulton building, in the light that came through dirty glass, and outside the city went about its Friday with the total indifference of a place that had survived everything and expected to survive this too. The car downstairs was a blue sedan, and Noah was in the back seat with his seatbelt on and a book open in his lap. The same Wolf book, the green one, which he'd apparently packed when Elena told him they were going to Aunt Susan's for a surprise adventure. He looked up when the building's front door opened and saw his mother first, and then saw the man behind her, and his face went through 3 expressions in rapid succession: recognition, calculation, and then the particular brand of 7-year-old certainty that doesn't leave room for social hesitation. He rolled down the car window. You were in our bookstore, he said to Damien. I was, Damien said. You had sad eyes. Damien crouched down to the window's level. It put him at approximately Noah's height, which Noah seemed to find appropriate. He adjusted in his seat, sitting up straighter, the book closed now in his lap with his finger holding his place. I did, Damien said. I think I had sad eyes for a long time. Noah considered this with the gravity of a person taking information seriously. My mom has them sometimes, he said, in the mornings when she thinks I'm not looking. From the corner of his eye, Damien felt rather than saw Elena go still. Yeah, Damien said. I know. Noah looked at him for another moment. Are you going to come to the bookstore again? He asked. If your mom says it's okay. Noah looked at his mother. Elena met her son's gaze with the specific expression of a woman who was not going to cry in a parking area outside an abandoned building on a Friday morning and was managing that successfully by approximately the thinnest possible margin. It's okay, she said. Noah looked back at Damien. He held up the wolf book. Do you like wolves? He asked. I don't know very much about them, Damien said. Noah's expression indicated that this was a remediable condition and that he personally was prepared to remediate it. I know a lot, he said. My mom knows the story by heart. She tells it without the book. The dad wolf in this one. He held up the cover. He goes away for a while, but he comes back. Mom says that's the hard part of the story, but also the important part. Damien looked at the cover of the book, then at Noah, then, briefly, at Elena, who was looking at something in the middle distance with extraordinary focus. I'd like to hear that story sometime, Damien said. You can come over, Noah said, with the easy generosity of someone who hasn't yet learned to make hospitality complicated. We have a couch. It's good for stories. Noah, Elena said. What? It is. It's a very good couch, Damien said. Noah nodded, satisfied, and opened his book again. Susan, in the driver's seat, a woman who shared Elena's cheekbones and had spent the last 40 minutes presumably running her own calculation about the man emerging from an abandoned building with her sister, looked at Damien through the windshield with an expression that communicated a complete and detailed assessment of his entire situation. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Damien straightened from the window. I'll call you, he said to Elena. You will, she said, in a tone that wasn't quite a question and wasn't quite a command. He watched the blue sedan pull out of the lot and turn onto Fulton Street and disappear into the city traffic. He stood on the sidewalk outside the building with his name on it for a long moment. Then he called Sasha. What followed was not clean, and it was not fast, and it did not resemble any version of resolution that could be called comfortable. The Webb piece on the Mills recording ran the following Tuesday, after Webb's legal team had spent the weekend with it. The headline was, again, deliberately dry. The content was not. Damien's attorneys were on record before the story published, voluntary cooperation already offered to the relevant federal contacts, a process initiated that would take 14 months to fully resolve and would result in a formal agreement that required, among other things, the complete dismantling of the Vail organization's operational structure and the conversion of its legitimate assets into a business entity under independent oversight. Damien did not go to prison. This was not a clean outcome, and he never described it as one. The agreement cost him the organization, the remaining properties, and a significant portion of what he'd accumulated over 20 years. What remained was enough to live on and enough to build from, in the specific way you built from something when you'd accepted that the old structure was gone and the new one had to be different in kind, not just in scale. Victor Crow was arrested in Milwaukee 18 days after the Fulton Building meeting at a hotel near the lake by a federal task force that had been tracking him since 2 hours after he'd walked out of the building. Karen Pollard's involvement was uncovered during the same investigation. She resigned before the formal process reached her. The Delaney Group, without Victor's coordination, fractured along existing internal lines over the following 3 months. A slow, structural collapse that Damien had anticipated and taken no active role in. Garrett cooperated with the federal process. He was 72 days from retirement age when the investigation closed. He aged visibly during those 72 days in a way that made him look like a different person at the end of them. He came to see Damien once, in the 3rd month, at the new office Damien was using. A small, bright room in a building near Lincoln Park, nothing like Monroe or the North Side Warehouse. A place that smelled like coffee and had windows that faced a street with trees. Garrett sat across from him and said, I've been trying to find the right thing to say for 3 months. Damien said, Don't. I need to say it. Garrett. Damien looked at him. At the man who'd known him since he was 19. At the damage and the age and the specific weight of a person who has done something they can't undo and has to keep getting up anyway. I know. I've known for 3 months. You can stop carrying it like I don't. Garrett looked at the window for a long time. Your father would have... My father isn't here, Damien said. Not unkindly. And I'm not him, which is probably the point. Garrett was quiet. Go home, Damien said. Take care of yourself. That's enough. Garrett went home. The bookstore on Addison was open 6 days a week. Elena kept the hours the way she'd always kept them. 9 to 7 on weekdays, 10 to 5 on Saturdays, closed Sundays, because Sunday was the day that belonged to her and Noah and whatever version of normal they were building week by week. She did not change the name of the store. She did not move. She had no interest in either of those things. What changed was small and specific, the way real change usually was. Damien came on Tuesdays. Not every Tuesday, but most Tuesdays, in the late afternoon when the traffic in the store was quietest and Noah was home from school doing homework at the table in the back room, which he did with the focused and slightly competitive energy of someone who had decided that being good at school was personally important. Damien would come through the door with the bell ringing above it, and Elena would look up from the register, and there would be a moment, always the same moment, always brief, where the accumulated weight of everything between them was visible in the air and then was set aside, because there was a store to run, and a kid doing homework, and a life that went on around the large and complicated thing they were building together. He'd learned the stock, knew where the used thrillers were, knew which section needed rotating, knew that the display near the window worked better with the covers facing out on the bottom shelf and the spines visible on the top. He'd suggested this to Elena in his second week of Tuesday afternoons, and she'd looked at him for a moment and then said, "Okay," and changed it, and the display had performed visibly better, which she did not comment on and which he did not mention. Noah tested him. This was consistent and deliberate, and Noah did not try to hide it. He asked Damien questions with the focused precision of a kid who had identified a variable in his life and was running experiments on it. He asked about wolves, which Damien studied so he could answer correctly, because being wrong in front of Noah felt like a specific kind of failure he wasn't willing to repeat. He asked about the building on Fulton. He'd seen it from the car. And Damien told him it was an old building that used to belong to his family and was going to become something else now. And Noah asked what, and Damien said he didn't know yet. And Noah said maybe it could be a library, and Damien said that was worth thinking about. He thought about it. 3 months later, he put the Fulton building into the conversion process as a community reading center, which was not a library technically, but was close enough that Noah took visible personal credit for the concept. Elena found out about it from the local news before Damien told her and called him at 9 in the morning on a Wednesday and said, "You named the reading room after your mother." "Yes." "You didn't tell me." "I was going to." A pause. "What was her name?" "Margaret," he said, a longer pause. "That's a good name for a reading room," she said. "I thought so." She ended the call. He sat in his office with the phone in his hand and thought about Margaret Vale, who had given him a compass at 9 years old and told him it was for the times when he couldn't see where he was going that he should trust the thing that pointed true rather than the thing that pointed toward what he wanted. He thought he understood what she'd meant now, in a way he hadn't at 9 and hadn't for most of the years since. The specific conversation happened in February. It was a Tuesday. Noah had reading group that evening. He'd moved on from the Wolf book and was deep into a series about a girl who trained falcons, which had produced a 3-week phase of researching birds of prey that Damien had found genuinely interesting and Elena had found both genuinely interesting and slightly exhausting. They were alone in the store after closing. Elena was doing inventory. Damien was reorganizing a shipment of new books that had come in at 4. They worked in the comfortable silence of two people who had become accustomed to occupying the same space, which was itself a thing he hadn't known he'd been missing until he had it. Elena was on the 3rd shelf, counting, when she said without looking up, "Reyes called me." Damien looked up from the shipment box. "When?" "This afternoon, while you were at your 2 o'clock." She kept counting. "He wanted to let me know that the federal process timeline has clarified, that the cooperation agreement is on track and there aren't going to be additional complications." She paused at a gap in the shelf where a book was missing. "He said you'd probably not tell me for another 2 weeks because you didn't want to get my hopes up in case something changed." Damien was quiet. "He's been with you for a long time," Elena said. 11 years. "He knows you pretty well." "Well enough," Damien said. She found the missing book, misplaced, 3 shelves down, and put it back where it belonged. Then she turned and looked at him across the length of the store, between the shelves and the lamp by the register, and the display near the window that performed better with the covers out on the bottom. "I have something to tell you," she said. Something in his chest shifted. The specific anticipatory stillness of a person who has learned that the thing coming next matters. I kept the letters, she said. He waited. Not just the storage unit. After you came back, after the first night, when you came through the door, and I told you to leave, I went upstairs and I took out the letters. The ones you wrote me, from before. I'd kept them in a box under my bed for 8 years because I couldn't make myself throw them away. And I told myself it was just habit, just inertia, just the clutter of a busy life. She looked at him steadily. It wasn't. I know, he said. I want you to know that I know that now. Not as a concession, just as a true thing that's been true for a long time, and that I was carrying alone because I didn't have anywhere to put it. She crossed her arms. Not defensive, just the posture of someone getting to something difficult. I'm not carrying it alone anymore. I want you to know that. He set down the book he was holding. He walked the length of the store, between the shelves, until he was standing in front of her, close enough to see the exact degree of effort in her face, the openness of it, the specific courage it took to say a true thing directly after years of learning that true things could cost you. I kept yours too, he said. Everything you wrote, every receipt, every note. The grocery list you left on my counter once. He paused. I know how that sounds. It sounds like someone who was very lonely, she said. Yes, he said. It does. She reached up and straightened the collar of his jacket. It was not a dramatic gesture. It was the gesture of someone who had decided to claim a small, ordinary right, the right to fix the collar of the person in front of them, and was doing it without announcement. He put his hand over hers. They stayed like that for a moment, in the bookstore on Addison, that smelled like paper and old wood, and the particular warmth of a place that had been loved for a long time. Outside, Chicago moved through its February with its typical combination of endurance and complaint. The cold doing what Chicago cold did. The streets full of people getting through it the way people always got through things. Imperfectly, persistently, without particular grace, but without stopping either. Noah came home from reading group at 8:15 with opinions. He had opinions about the Falcon book's 3rd chapter specifically, which he relayed to both of them in the kitchen with the focused intensity of someone whose book group had been divided on a key question of the main character's decision-making and who was now taking his case to a wider audience. Damien listened carefully and asked 2 questions that Noah found worth considering and Elena found worth watching Damien ask. At 8:45, she told Noah it was time for bed. He went through the standard negotiation, 5 more minutes, 1 more chapter, the question of whether the falcon in the book was based on a real species and could they look it up, and arrived at 9 o'clock at the bathroom, teeth brushed, in his wolf print pajamas that were slightly too short now at the ankles because he was growing at a rate that Elena found personally confronting. He was in bed with the lamp on when Damien appeared in the doorway. Noah looked at him. Are you going to say goodnight? If that's okay. Noah considered it with the genuine consideration he gave most things. Yeah, he said, that's okay. Damien came in and sat on the edge of the bed. Noah was looking at the ceiling with the expression of someone who has something to say and is deciding whether to say it. Dad, he said. The word landed in the room like something physical. Damien went very still. Noah was still looking at the ceiling. His hands were folded on his chest over the blanket, compass necklace resting at his throat, the small silver face of it catching the lamplight. Is that okay? Noah said. He turned his head to look at Damien. His eyes were the eyes Damien saw in mirrors, and had spent 7 years not knowing they existed in the world. Mom said it was up to me, what I called you. She said there wasn't a wrong answer. Damien's chest was doing something complex and involuntary. Yeah, he said. His voice was not entirely steady, and he didn't try to make it so. That's okay. Noah nodded as if this had confirmed something he'd already mostly decided. He turned back to the ceiling. The wolf in my book, he said. The dad. He goes away and then he comes back and he doesn't know how to be part of the family anymore because he's been alone so long. He paused. But he learns. It takes the whole book. But he does. Damien looked at this person, 7 years old, in pajamas with ankles too short, carrying his grandmother's compass and his father's eyes and 8 years of his mother's particular courage in every line of his face, and felt something settle in him that had been unsettled for so long he'd forgotten what settled felt like. That's a good story, he said. Mom tells it better, Noah said, because she knows it by heart. He yawned, suddenly and completely, the way children yawned, total, unself-conscious, the whole body in it. Will you be here tomorrow? Yes, Damien said. Okay, Noah said. He closed his eyes. Good night, Dad. Damien sat on the edge of the bed until Noah's breathing slowed and deepened, and the lamp threw its quiet light across the room, and the compass rose and fell with each breath. Then he got up carefully, so as not to disturb anything, and went back down the hall. Elena was in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a mug, looking out the window at the Chicago night. She heard him and turned. She looked at his face. He called you Dad, she said, not a question. Yes. She nodded once and turned back to the window. He came and stood beside her, close enough that their arms touched, looking at the same stretch of city night, the amber of the streetlights, the dark space between buildings, the lit windows of other lives going on in their own particular ways at 9:15 on a Tuesday in February. He's been thinking about it for a while, Elena said. He asked me 3 weeks ago if it would be weird. I told him nothing about feelings is weird. He said, what if the feeling is complicated? I told him complicated was just the word adults used for true. Damien looked at her profile in the window light, at the woman who had built a bookstore and a life and a child who knew the word complicated at 7 and used it accurately. Thank you, he said. For what specifically? For 8 years of doing it right, he said, when I wasn't there to do any of it. For making him the person who just said that word to me and meant it. His voice was very quiet. That was all you. Elena was quiet for a moment. Outside, a car passed on the street below, its headlights moving across the ceiling. It was mostly me, she said. You built the part of him that believes things can be fixed. He looked at her. He doesn't get that from me, she said. I'm a person who maintains. I keep things going. I'm good at that. She turned to look at him. But the part of him that reads about wolves who come back and thinks that's the important part of the story, he gets that from somewhere else. The kitchen was warm, and the mug in her hands was still sending up a thin thread of steam, and the city outside was doing what cities did. And Damien Vale, who had spent 20 years being the thing other people feared and then spent 14 months dismantling it down to the foundation, stood in the kitchen above a bookstore on Addison Avenue and understood that this specific ordinary moment, the steam from the mug and the amber light and the woman looking at him, was the thing that had been true all along underneath everything else. He wasn't the most feared man in Chicago anymore. He wasn't sure what he was yet. The process of becoming it was ongoing, imperfect, regularly uncomfortable in the way that actual change was uncomfortable rather than the performed kind. But he was here. And she was here. And down the hall, a boy in wolf pajamas was sleeping with his grandmother's compass at his throat, dreaming whatever a 7-year-old dreamed when the story had reached the part where the wolf came back and learned, slowly, chapter by chapter, how to stay. The city outside kept its own pace. The lamp in the hallway threw its light toward the kitchen. Elena set her mug on the counter, and Damien reached over and turned off the kitchen light, and the dark came in warm from the window, and the street lights, and all the small lit windows of all the other lives going on around them. Nobody said anything. Nobody needed to.